Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Faerie Conclave. I'm your host, Alec. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm super excited to be joined by an extra special guest. It's Megan. How are you doing today, Megan?
Hey, Alec. I'm good. Thanks for having me here. For everyone listening, my name is Megan Smith. I'm a game designer over at Wizards of the Coast. I've been there as a game designer for about 5 years now. I started playing Magic back in the early 1990s when I was a really itty-bitty little child. My mom brought home some Portal learner decks that me and my brother started playing, and I've been a pretty casual to-enfranchise, there's a spectrum there, Magic player for the rest of time, up until now.
I love that. I feel like it's really special to me to have a long history with Magic and then also be able to kind of contribute something to the Magic community. So for you, it must be even a step further than that now you're behind the scenes, seeing what goes on and actually creating the cards and things like that.
It was so mind-blowing going from just a fan to making Magic that it was just a completely different world. I never thought that I could do a job like this. I never thought that I want to be a game designer, I want to work on Magic was never something I really thought about until the opportunity presented itself. And now that I've been doing it, there's nothing else I'd rather do. Yeah,
it's honestly sounds like a dream job. We had a little introductory call a week ago, and just kind of the way you were describing things and explaining the work you do, it sounds like it is your dream job too. So
yeah, and every job is still a job. There's still some days where I have to go in and nerf my cards and shed a tear as I do so, and it's hard. But there's a ton of days, 99% of the days are just full of joy, full of fun, full of thinking, oh, who is this card for? And I hope they love it. And then waiting until they see that card and getting that kind of reciprocal joy.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah. That's really cool. And it's really interesting too. I love seeing the things people do with custom Magic cards and building their own sets, and I can't imagine doing that, but having it actually be printed and people playing with those cards and things like that. I have a million questions just about that in general, but I'm gonna try my best to focus in today on a little bit more specific area of what you've created at Magic, and that is the Tarkir Dragonstorm commander decks. Tell me a little bit more about when you first found out that you would be leading the Tarkir Dragonstorm commander decks. And yeah, what was your reaction to that?
I was over the moon. This is my first time being lead for a product, a paper Magic product. So for me, it was just finally a chance to have the reins in my hands. I get to make the decisions. That also means I have to do all the boring stuff like paperwork and spreadsheets, but I was I'll do it. I'll do whatever it takes. So I was super over the moon. I was super thrilled. They're cool, you're getting 5 decks. And I'm oh my gosh, that's so many, which makes sense for Tarkir. But, we have other sets where, we've experimented doing 2 decks or fewer than 5 in a couple of sets. So I was anticipating slightly fewer than 5 decks, but they're no, we trust you. 5 is a good number. I was super excited. It was daunting at first, but quickly fell into a rhythm and just the time flew.
Nice. I love that. Were you a fan of the original Tarkir sets?
So there was a small gap in time where I kind of stopped playing Magic, and it was pretty much in the time that Tarkir came out,
Gotcha.
right beforehand. So I was moving around. It was kind of around the time where I was in college. If my memory and math is serving me correctly, I'm trying not to date myself as I say that. But I think it was right at the end of Tarkir. I remember taking a bunch of cards and putting together a deck for F&M, not knowing what was newer in the set. And I remember getting beat up by Jeskai Black. And that was kind of my first introduction back into Magic, was getting beat up by that deck with my homebrew F&M deck. But the cards all looked super cool, and I was kind of sad I missed out on that. So unfortunately, missed out on it the first time, but got to dive headfirst into it this time.
I love that so much. That just reminded me of, I did something very similar. I had a very weak homebrewed kind of Sultai deck with cards I just thought were cool. And I did something similar. I went to Friday Night Magic and got absolutely destroyed by both the Siege Rhino deck at the time, and then there was a Monastery Mentor kind of aggro deck too, and both of them just absolutely floored me, and I thought that was so funny. I was okay, maybe I'm not ready for standard yet. I need to do some research.
Yeah, maybe I should look at what else is legal in this format, not just cool cards I saw on the internet.
Yeah, exactly. So good. It is special that this set got 5 decks. It totally makes sense based on the way Tarkir is built, but I think something that's really cool is it reminds me of just kind of like back in the day when we only got one set of commander decks per year, and those always had 5 decks just for some arbitrary reason. I'm not maybe based on like 5 colors, so they did 5 decks per year, but something about that just kind of like feels right to me. It's like we have a pot of 4, but we have like a choice here. Somebody can pick one deck and we'll leave one out, type of thing.
That's an interesting question. I don't know why we did 5 decks, because that was before my time in the building, of course. But yeah, there is something that feels right about it. It's like 5 colors, 5 decks is just like one of those numbers that just like sticks with you. Maybe it's just a Magic player thing. 5 is like a nice number.
Yeah, it's true. When I see like a cycle of 5 cards, it's perfect. Like that's maybe it is a Magic player thing. So when you started working on the Tarkir Dragonstorm commander decks, what does that process look like behind the scenes?
Yeah, so when we start the decks, if we don't already know the factions, getting introduced to the factions is like the first thing. There are some products where we just kind of do 5 decks. Maybe they're not factionalized. So we were talking about the 2017 2018 commander products that used to come out. Those weren't factionalized, but you still had to like figure out where you're starting from. So our process was really easy. We're like, here are the clans, here are their color identities, here's what they've done in the past. And we kind of want to stay true to the clans, so we don't want to veer too sharply away from clan identities. I don't want to make like a weird Abzan Spellslinger deck. Like that doesn't
Right.
make sense. Even if that's cool and novel and interesting, it's just not what Abzan does. So we had kind of some clear guidelines of where to go, but there was still a ton of room, ton of space to play inside of those guidelines. We had Adam Prozac on the team, who is the lead for the main set, for the standard set for Tarkir Dragonstorm. And he is a huge fan of Tarkir. So he was really my font of knowledge. Whenever I needed a question about something, I would ask Adam. We basically just set up a small team at first that just kind of brainstorms, like, what is cool? Like, what feels like the clan? What is interesting? What makes sense? And kind of just like throw a bunch of ideas onto the board. And then we would build out small decks that are just kind of like examples of cards that would go into the deck. So not like full 100 cards with mana bases, more of just like packages of cards that would be neat. So it's like, for instance, with the Abzan, we looked at +1/+1 counters because Abzan have done +1/+1 counters in the past with like Outlast. And we're like, okay, like what's cool here? What's different? What's new? Very important when we're designing decks is what's going to grab the attention of fans who already have a deck of this archetype, and how do we get them interested in this deck and not just be like, oh, that's just another +1/+1 counter deck. So we looked at all the cards, we looked at everything, we're like, well, there isn't really anything here new, so let's go to the next idea. And we kind of just go down the list, building out these little small clumps of packages. Some of the themes were just like really obvious because the main set has really good, strong themes and mechanics. So we were able to steal a lot from them. I really fell in love with Flurry. I think it's just a really accessible keyword for people who are learning Spellslinger or learning like how cool double spelling can be or how powerful it can be. So I really liked the idea of latching onto that for Jeskai. That one was really easy, of just focusing in on that. The identity for the Jeskai deck to become like this spells that target theme didn't come until much later. We started with just like a traditional Spellslinger shell that wanted to double spell at first, and it evolved over a longer period of time there. The Dragons deck, I think, was Dragons just like the second we sat down, we're like, okay, so Teamer's Dragons, right? We all agree? Okay, moving on. Same with Sultai. I think the Sultai leaves the graveyard stuff felt really appropriate to kind of the new identity for Sultai, where they're less about being like evil, conniving, and like using zombies for like dastardly deeds, and it's more about renewal, and it's more about like rebuilding. It's more about this kind of like recycling almost, and becoming kind of like farmers. Leaving the graveyard was really easy. It's a main set theme. I love that theme. I love moving cards between zones is what I call it. Just like I want my card to go from the battlefield to the graveyard to my hand to the battlefield to my hand to the graveyard. I just love all of that. And then it grew into having the landfall sub-theme early on as we were kind of building out the decks earlier in the process, because I really fell in love with the idea that the Sultai are really just trying to like rebuild the land, like renew their culture, and kind of like have this like fresh start. And I really love the idea of landfall playing into that. Who am I forgetting?
No, wait. Which one? Oh, Mardu.
Mardu. We forgot about Mardu.
Yes.
Mardu, yes. Sorry, Mardu. Sorry, Zergo fans. For Mardu, I think we latched on to like tokens go wide to play into the adding white back into the color identity of Mardu. So previous Mardu had more like sacrifice stuff. And this one, we really wanted you to build up like this giant army because that's more of what Mardu was about. It was more about the collective and the community, which felt very tokensy. It felt very much like amass a giant army to me. So that one came in pretty early, and then it kind of evolved a little bit to be sort of sacrificey because that's just kind of like a fun way to play with tokens and is a nice callback to like previous Mardu.
Yeah, I love this. I think the kind of main set theme going on where we're taking each of these clans that we've seen before, but it's a twist on them in that we're focusing on a different central color being a part of the mechanics and the flavor where like the Dragon Lords took away that color and now we're regaining those. It's just like so chef's kiss. Like it hits every single like flavor, mechanical. It was just a home run. And I feel like the commander decks are kind of a distilled version of that idea. I'm definitely the one I'm the most excited about is Sultai just because I'm a Sultai boy. But the fact that Sultai before their keyword was exploit, and just like you were saying, they were like kind of evil and conniving before, and now their keyword is renew. And it's like, instead of putting your own people into the graveyard, it's like taking them out of the graveyard. I just think that's perfect and makes me really happy. So yeah, the little like twists on all of these I think are really clever and really well done.
Yeah, and a lot of that came from the world building and creative. Lauren Bond was our creative lead, and she was our second source of knowledge. So Adam as a fan, loving Tarkir, Lauren who kind of can make the changes or make the calls in the new lore or the new world that we're kind of putting together. So using both of them jointly to kind of get the right flavor was really important. When Lauren told me about the philosophy of the clans and the returning color, I fell in love with that concept. I loved it so much that I designed the cycle of wills around that whole concept,
Ooh.
where each of the wills in the cycle is the color that the clan is getting back and is hopefully a good representation of kind of what that adds to the clan's identity now that they have that color back. So like the white one for Mardu, I think is one of my favorites. It creates a bunch of tokens and it deals damage equal to the number of tokens, like that collective power that you get from having such a large community and building up that community just felt so much like what Mardu got after the Dragon Lords were defeated. So each of the wills kind of tries to represent a little bit of that identity coming back and like what is new about the clan. Also, the art is great on those. If you haven't seen them, the art on those cards is a callback to the Ascendancy enchantments, where it's the group shot where you get to see all the cool members of the clan, and there's a dragon, which makes it 10 times better.
Wait, I did not realize that. That is really cool.
Yeah.
I always had back then when original cons came out, they had all of those arts for the Ascendancies as like desktop wallpapers that you could download. And I used them for a while. I love them. Yeah, so good. Yeah, and perfect for Commander, which I love. So yeah, no, that's really cool. And that's exactly the kind of stuff that I wanted to talk to you about, are these little like hidden callbacks to the previous sets. Since we're talking about newly designed cards for these decks, are there any that come to mind that you designed for these decks that were kind of like filling gaps in the decks that you felt like needed something? And yeah, how did those cards fit in?
Let's start with the Abzan deck. I think that one had the hardest time in development of trying to finish out games. Like, okay, we got all these really high toughness guys, we turn them into attackers with our like, turn off the defender text, attack with your butt deck thing.
Yeah.
It's like, it was like fine. It was like, okay, we're just attacking though. Like there isn't anything like interesting or different about what this deck is doing. How do we want this take on a toughness deck to feel different from Doran the Siege Tower, which everyone is lamenting the power creep of Doran. But I think Doran is still super cool and does way different things. The things that we want to do is we wanted to just give the players who love playing with high toughness just a couple of different avenues to build their decks and to interact and to have more texture in their gameplay. So one of my favorite cards in the Abzan deck that we designed was Jaws of Defeat, which is a 4-mana black enchantment. That says, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, target opponent loses life equal to the difference between that creature's power and
Yes.
its toughness. Which I know there's a lot of chatter on the internet, like, oh, do you do negative damage? No, it works exactly the way you think it should work. It works for power statted as well as toughness statted creatures. And that was kind of a duality of the card that I wanted, because I wanted there to be more people interested in, like, Yargle and Multani players to be interested
Yes.
in this
Yeah.
card as well. People who love abnormally power statted creatures as well as abnormally toughness statted creatures. So we designed that deck as a way for the toughness deck to help finish out the games, close out the games. If you can't get your commander into play, or if your commander's too expensive and attacking is kind of not an avenue, we wanted kind of like Warstorm Surge for butts, was the
Nice.
idea of designing this card. And I think it's a really cool option. And I love that people who do have Yargle and Multani decks are like, let's go.
Yes. Oh yeah. No, I think it is brilliant to put this effect in black too, because of those other, like, black has a lot of the weirdly high powers and very low toughness, and it's like, it's a cool text box that is wording that we've never really seen before on that card, specifically that works in like both of those situations. So yeah, that's really, really cool one.
I like the idea that people will put that into maybe the Mardu deck, because you're making, like X1 creatures, and there's a lot of effects that power stat the creatures, like Ogre Battle Driver. So maybe you get smart, you stack your triggers, and then you're like, I'm a genius.
Right. Yeah. No, it's true. If your deck is making a bunch of tokens, but they're all like 3/1s or something like that, then this will do a lot of damage over time.
Let's see. What's another card that I think was kind of designed to help stopgap or fill in some blanks? I think the Dragons deck is another good example. A lot of Dragons decks have a hard time filling out their curve. And there
Mm,
are a lot of dragons that do just like very specific things, which might just not be good in the situations where you want to play that card on curve. Like a 4-mana dragon on turn 4 that cares about, like, how many artifacts you control. Well, if you don't have a lot of artifacts, that dragon's kind of a French vanilla in a sense. It's not really doing
yeah.
anything better than the sum of its parts. So I designed Parapet Thrasher as like a card that you'd be happy to play almost at any point in time in the game. In the early game, it's kind of just like good value. It can help you like draw cards, well, bottle them, exile them. It helps get rid of problematic artifacts, like if other people are ramping beyond you or catching up to you, you can kind of take out some mana rocks. And then it helps kind of deal damage to the table equally, like make sure everyone's life totals are kind of getting whittled down all at the same time. So that card was designed specifically for Dragons decks as a card you're happy to play early because it triggers on itself. You're happy to play it
Mm,
late because it doesn't need to deal the combat damage any other dragons do. So you don't have to worry about, oh, I have to play it and then untap with it. It's not a bad top deck in that sense. So that card was really there to just be like a good glue piece to kind of help dragons decks who are maybe having a slower start bridge their way into like the mid and late game where they can start playing those really big, really expensive, impactful dragons. Wanted something that was maybe a little boring. Some people don't like utility cards, which I think
hmm.
they're wrong. I think utility cards are so good. Of course, they're not splashy, they're not 10 mana, they don't win you the game, but man, I just love telling people, oh, well, I'm going to do 3 things this turn because this card tells me that I get to do all the cool stuff. And that card
Yeah.
for me was just like, this is what Parapet Thresher's job is, and I think it does that job really well.
We're on the same page because I'm always telling my playgroup to put more lands in their deck. And it's exactly that. I'm like, see, you have lots of cooler cards in your deck than I do, but I actually got to play all the cool cards in my deck because I have so many lands. So,
Exactly.
and that argument does not always work, but I try to make it at least. But yeah, no, I really like that for decks that, like the teamer deck, that care about and need those high cost creatures and spells at the end. Is those decks I've seen built and that I built myself are like all of the early game plays are just mana ramp. That makes sense and is good to have, but it's like if I can do something a little bit more interesting than just like playing Rampant Growth and Cultivate and Arcane Signet the first 3 or 4 turns, then that's something I'm really interested in.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
saw some chatter. I saw some chatter online where people wanted more ramp for the dragons deck, and I totally get it. You really just want to get to like big splashy dragons. But
Mm,
as I don't have a typal deck of my own, but I imagine a part of the appeal of playing typal decks is that you get to play the creatures of the type that you're super excited about. And I like putting more dragons into the deck, a little less ramp, but if you can play a really cool dragon on every turn of the game, I think that's just like a way more exciting experience for like newer players or players who are less spiky, that really just want to be all about the dragons. It makes them feel good to play those cards instead of ramping and doing nothing for 6 turns and then playing a dragon.
Right.
They feel like they're living the dream of being a dragon master more often than they aren't. And I think that's important. And that's kind of the goal of the dragons deck, was a newer player would find this deck really exciting and really fun. A person who just loves dragons would say, there are so many dragons, I'm actually having a hard time figuring out which dragon to cast. They're all so cool. That's kind of like the vision I had for the deck and for who I think would be into and want to play that deck.
So is that something that you think about while you're building these decks? I kind of know people who play a deck like this, and I want to cater to that type of person?
Yes, the person, his name is Adam, and he loves big idiots. He has a dinosaurs deck, and his reaction every time he plays a dinosaur is just pure joy and excitement. He doesn't want to do the boring ramp and like removal spell thing. He's like, nope, just want to play my dinosaurs. And so I thought about my friend Adam every time I sat down to design a dinosaurs. I'm like, what would Adam think if he played this dinosaur, or played this dragon rather? Would Adam like this card? It's not just people I know personally. I do think about the types of players that I meet, the types of players that I have been in the past. Like, we've all kind of been through an evolution of, we've all been a Timmy or a Tammy, we've all been a Spike at some point. Like, where you are now isn't who you were at the start of when you played Magic. And so for the Tarkir deck specifically, because I had 5, I had so much flexibility of different play styles and different themes to give the decks. I really also wanted the decks to appeal to those different styles of players, not just people who like graveyard stuff, but people who like high complexity, or they like managing triggers and they like having a lot of game actions. You know, people who like playing things that are just singularly powerful, like dragons. So I tried to map each of the decks closer to those like player psychographics we talked about, the Timmy Tammy, the Spikes, the Johnny Jennies. Vorthos and Mel are a little bit harder, but I think the Dragons deck is a really good example of just like a big cool deck that maybe Vorthoses would like, in the sense of like, it's just dragons. But maybe I'm reaching on that one. But I did want to try, I wanted the decks to kind of fall on a spectrum between all of those, where it's like there's something for everybody, not just in the archetypes that you can choose from, but also the play styles of the type of player you are.
That's a really cool way to think about the decks, from like conception to design, and throughout the whole process, is thinking about like what type of person is the kind of person that would want to play this, and is this going to do something different from like decks that person might already be playing. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And also the Vorthoses, from what I've seen, are super, super happy with the characters, which I think when you're returning to a plane, you always have fan favorite characters to return to. But like, I know a lot of people who don't normally play Spellslinger type decks, but who love Narset as a character. And so they're just super hyped about the Jeskai deck. They're like, I just want to play Narset's cool deck.
I was really hoping the art would show Narset riding the dragon, because I think people's brains would have exploded. But she looks so good in the art. I honestly am so ecstatic with how she came out. Her art with Shiko, the dragon, is just so calm and serene, but also threatening, which I think is amazing to get both of those feelings into one piece of art.
Yes. Yeah, that's one thing that's cool about the designs of these decks that I also wanted to mention is most of them, except the Jeskai, they have 2 commanders. One is basically the new Khan of the clan, and the second one is the Spirit Dragon that has teamed up with this Khan. But I do love that, because of the way the story plays out, that Shiko and Narset unified is on one card for Narset. And I just think, yeah, you're right. The art on that is gorgeous and kind of fits in exactly with Narset's vibes.
I loved the idea of a team up card for a while, and it was hard to figure out like where to put it. And we eventually decided that it should be on one of the face commanders, so we could get that feeling of the Khans and the dragons are working together. They're not just 2 separate entities off doing their own things. They are coming together as a team, and a team-up card is the best way to illustrate that. Last time we had Ojutai and Zergo on a team-up card, and I know people had opinions about that. So this time around, I hope we did a better job of a team-up you could actually believe and root for.
Yeah, I did love the color overlap from that previous card, but maybe in lore-wise, it was a little harder to to take. So yeah, one question I'm curious what your answer will be on this, but it's throughout the process of making these decks and releasing them and now having seen a lot of people playing them and giving feedback, what part of these decks are you most proud of?
I am super happy with all the creative ways that people have been playing with them. In playtesting, it's hard to see all the combinations of the way that cards come together. There are so many more games played after a set has been released than we could ever play internally with the number of people that we have and the time that we have. So a lot of the gameplay is extrapolated based off of the play patterns we see, and we kind of just imagine a lot of the scenarios where things will work together and come together. And some of them do and some of them don't. But the thing that I'm really happy about these cards is and the decks in general is I think that in all the gameplay videos that I have watched, which is so many gameplay videos, by the way, all on 2x speed, or else I never would have had time to watch them all, is every deck has had a chance to be like the threat, or every deck has had its time in the spotlight as having like a really cool, iconic moment, or something that people would be like, oh my gosh, I need to tell my friends about what happened. Every deck had a moment like that in like different decks in all the gameplays I saw. Each one had a different moment. And I think that's what I really am the proudest about of the decks, is that each deck has its this is my moment built into it somehow. And that when you see it happen, you're just like, yes, this is what the deck is about. This is what I was meant to be doing. It's a huge light bulb moment for a lot of players where they're just like, I didn't realize Magic could be this cool. So I'm just really happy that those moments I envisioned while building the decks and tweaking the decks and playtesting them have mostly come to fruition.
Yeah, shout out to Loading Ready Run. I just watched their Elder Dragon Social Club video where they played these commander decks against each other. And it was exactly that. Like, somebody would get their game plan online and start pulling ahead. And it happened pretty fast in this game. And I was like, oh, this game's going to be... It's going to be a short one because this person's so far ahead. And then somebody else would like remove something and then progress their own game plan. And I feel like that game was such a good example of all four decks got to do their thing and got to show off some really cool cards and like kill some things on other players' boards. And all that kind of happened around the same time. Sometimes balancing decks is hard when this person's deck, they could have done their thing, but they needed 2 more turns, and my deck just like felt too fast compared to theirs. But from what I've seen so far, it seems like these decks have, even though they all have totally different themes and game plans, they have a similar snowballing point that they get to with their game plan.
Yeah, and I loved watching all the ways, the different ways that each of the decks reached that. I don't think it was the same combination of cards in each game either, where it was just like, usually there was a commander involved, which is kind of normal for commander. Your commander's like, you know, the focal point of a lot of decks. But there was always a different card that was also combining with their commander or combining with their like engine piece that was creating those moments. So it just made me feel good that every card felt like it was pulling its weight or it was important in each of those interactions.
Yeah, I remember during that game, the Mardu deck had Blade of Selves involved, and the way the new Zurgo face commander works with Blade of Selves, I'm just like absolutely in love with, and with Myriad in general, and that got a little wild in that game. So yeah, it was really cool to see.
I might be the #1 Myriad enjoyer in the entire building. I will stake my claim that I love Myriad more than anyone else in the building, even the person who invented it. I think I love it more than that person does. So when we were building this tokens deck, originally I wanted to put Myriad in the deck because I'm like, oh, this is perfect. Attacking each of the players equitably with Myriad is one of my favorite parts about Myriad, is it's just like, everybody's getting hit. I'm not picking on you, I promise. Everyone's going to get damage is kind of a nice political way to approach it. But I also just love the individual Myriad designs that we've done in the past, where it's like, oh yes, it's a cool thing that I get 3 of because I'm playing multiplayer. That's neat. Or 2 of, depends on what the design is. But for this deck, at first, Myriad didn't work. You had to sacrifice the tokens in some way to get the trigger because originally it was dies. And if you are not familiar with Myriad, the tokens get exiled at the end of combat. They don't get sacrificed. So if you've been playing Zurgo wrong, you better watch out. Because we change it to exile, leaves the battlefield, it works with those tokens getting exiled. And that just made me really happy. I put more Myriad cards into the deck after we changed it because I was like, the throttle is unleashed. No one will be sad. Maybe the opponents will be sad, but not the player. Yes, I was hoping that people would want to play that deck with Myriad. Blade of Selves, I think, was like, when I saw that card, I just fell in love with it. I played a bunch of Blink Blink decks in like 2017, 2018, which is when I started like really ramping up how much Commander I was getting involved in as a player. And Blade of Selves went into every deck I played. I'm like, there is not a single bad creature that this is bad with in any of the decks I play. I should put this in all of my decks. That was my thought process. Like, all my creatures have have a combat damage triggers or ETBs triggers or leaves triggers. This is perfect. So that was one of my, not seriously a pet card, because I feel like a lot of people maybe play this card, but I really wanted to build the deck where you could put that card onto virtually any creature in the deck and be happy to do so.
Yes. Okay. I'm so glad to hear that you are the Myriad person behind the scenes, because I'm also a huge fan of Myriad. And part of the reason why is because its first appearance was Commander 2015, which were the very first Commander decks I ever played. So I have fond memories of that, but I feel like we get a Myriad card like here and there every once in a while. And every time I see one, I'm just like, I know there's somebody in that building who just loves this and just like wants to put a card in here. So I love that. Thank you so much for your service here.
You're welcome. The last one that I designed was in the Lost Caverns of Ixalan's dinosaur deck. It was the Scion of Calamity, which was a top-down design that I came up with that ended up getting Myriad was just the perfect mechanic for that card. But I got that card into the deck and I love it so much. And I was like, they can't stop me.
So
I can
good.
just keep doing this.
Sweet. Okay, so I'm curious if there is like a spicy interaction in one of these decks that people might not notice at first glance. Is there anything that comes to mind there?
Somebody pointed out to me that there is an infinite combo in one of the decks, which we do a really good job of trying not to put in there, but they do pop up. They usually take a bunch of cards combinations together. The combination that people found was Expansion Explosion, which is kind of a known offender for sometimes going infinite. So the infinite combo that we found was you have to play the Adaptive Training Post, which is a new card. Get it up to the 3 counters where you can copy. You cast the instant or sorcery, remove the counters from the Adaptive Training Post, and then you cast Expansion Explosion for the expansion part, which is the copy part. And then you create a copy of it to copy itself, essentially. And it'll just create a copy that creates a copy. So that's like the start of the combo, which is 3 cards already. An instant to go on the stack, Adaptive Training Post with 3 counters, and then Expansion Explosion. And then, if you have one of the Magecraft creatures, Archmage Emeritus or Stormkiln Artist, they have Magecraft for their abilities. So they will either draw you all your cards or make you a bunch of treasure, or both if you have both in the deck. And then hopefully that wins you the game, I suppose. But as you can see, it was a many card interaction, which is really hard to see sometimes, and I kind of love that people found that. I was really worried that the infinite combo was going to be with Steward of the Harvest in Sultai. That card made me a little nervous when we made it, but I was so excited about it that I was like, I feel like this card's got legs, as we would say. Like, I feel like this card's going to do some really cool things. So I'm happy that the infinite combo was not with that card, but maybe there's an infinite out there that I haven't seen yet.
I like that challenge. It's like, here's a precon. Let's see if we, like, from all the combinations of cards in this deck, let's see if we can try to find an infinite combo. And it doesn't surprise me at all that the one that was found, even if it takes like 3 or 4 plus cards to do, is in the Jeskai deck. Like, that feels right to me.
Yeah, if anybody should get to do that, it should be the Spellslinger deck.
Yeah, exactly.
The deck also has Storm in it, so I don't know, maybe.
Yes. Yeah, I'm curious, after playtesting these decks a lot and seeing them played out in the wild for a little while, what is it that you just like most about these decks and seeing them played?
I think I mostly just love people's reactions to the decks, especially people that I can actually see, which is a very small portion of the player base, is actually visible in terms of social media, content creation, things like that. It's such a small fraction. So the things that have surprised me the most are content creators or friends in the community who are like, oh my God, I'm so excited for this specific deck. And it just does not match their vibe at all. And I just never would have guessed that would be their favorite deck. Like, I think Zbex loving the Abzan deck just threw me for a loop. I never would have guessed that was her favorite deck. But that is just something that I think is so great about Magic, is when somebody's excited about something, they'll tell you and they'll shout it from the rooftops, and you just learn more about people. And Magic has all these great little like niches of archetypes and types of players. And just like my favorite thing to see is just who comes out of the woodwork as the Abzan fan that you never, the toughness Doran lover that you never would have guessed, or that quiet person in the corner who's like, ah, yes, I do love Storm and I do love taking 100 game actions, and you're like, I never would have thought that. You don't seem like the type. So I think it's great that people can like self-express through all the decks because they're so different. There's so many different archetypes among just the 5 that are here, that I think it's just been great to see everybody kind of put up their banner and be like, this is my clan, this is what I'm here, this is what I'm all about, and just be loud and proud about it.
This set is perfect for that too. I think Tarkir it's gone down as such a fan favorite because of that, because you can identify with one of the clans and you like their play style or you like their vibe. Tarkir Dragonstorm especially has just kind of perfected that. It's harder to decide now more than ever which clan is cool because they're all so cool and like I want to play all of these decks. But yeah, that made me think so tomorrow night I'm doing a little pre-release with friends, and the pre-release kits are similarly themed based on the clan. And it's been really interesting. I'm playing with some new players, like people who've only played for a few months. It's been really interesting. Like, you're the nicest guy I know in the entire world, like playing the meanest deck here. And I think that's really funny. It's funny to see what people gravitate towards.
You learn a lot about a person
yes.
when you start making them pick a clan. Yeah, I think that is just one of the best things about our factionalized sets, where we have these strong core identities baked into these color combinations. Ravnica is the one that we talk about the most, of having just the strongest player to character identification, where it's like, oh, all of these different guilds stand for something super specific, or all these Tarkir clans have something very specific about them that I resonate with, whether it's the playstyle of the cards or it's specifically like the philosophies of the clans. I think that is just so interesting, and it's such a strength of Magic that every time we do these factionalized sets, I'm so excited for those quizzes that are just like, which clan would you be? Like, kind of how we used to do like back in the day, quote unquote, like, what flavor bread are you? It's like, I want to know what flavor bread I am. Yes. I want to know what clan I am. Yes. Because people just want to have like something like that to latch onto, and then find other people who are also in that clan or are that type of bread and be like, oh, you're my friends. We have something in common. Let's talk. Let's be friends. And I think that's such a great like icebreaker going into pre-release of just like, I picked this clan. Let me find all the other people who also picked this clan box, and I'm going to go talk to them or socialize with them.
Yeah. And then on the other side of that, you can also be like, ooh, my best friend loves Abzan and I love Sultai. And now we have to like duke it out and do a bunch of games with these decks to see which clan is better.
Yes, the bragging rights.
Yes, exactly. I want to ask you, this is something that I asked you previously, and then I know you posted a little bit about it online, but I would love to get your thoughts on this here too. And that is, are there any pet cards that you kind of snuck into these deck lists that you would like to talk about?
Yeah, the one that you're referring to online was the Gerard and Lord of Extinction combo that is in the Sultai deck. It's just a callback to what was kind of the boogeyman of my local game store when I started getting back into Commander and started playing it a lot, and people were just like all up in arms about it. It was just this, it was our like rule zero thing of the past. It was like, okay, no Gerard, no Lord of Extinction. You can have Gerard, but no Lord of Extinction in your deck. Kill us with something else. Kill us with a real creature, you coward. So I thought bringing back the nostalgia of that combo was just like super fun, and it really like helped the Sultai deck close out the game. So it wasn't just for my own personal tastes. The other one, which gets memed on a lot, is Zatalpa. And
yes.
I know that everyone's like, oh, it's not a Magic precon without a Zatalpa. But when we were designing the decks, I was sitting next to the person who led the deck. I led the whole product, but she was in charge of specifically the Abzan deck. Victoria Sperling. She's amazing. She's great. I basically just stood up and poked my nose over the cubicle wall. And I was like, hey, Tori, so I know it's like a huge meme, and before I could even finish the sentence, she's like, you want me to put Zatalpa in the precon, don't you? And I'm like, pretty please. But hear me out. Hear me out. It's so much better in this precon than any other precon it's been in. Like, think about it. It's 8 power when it's attacking, and double, it's got all this other stuff, double strike, indestructible. Like, how do you beat it?
Right.
So it's a meme, but it's one of those cards where a new player reads a card like Zatalpa and they're like, they have that moment. How do you beat that? It's huge. It's indestructible. It's got flying. It's one of those cards like a Chroma Angel of Wrath was for me when I was a new player. A card had everything going on for it. Zatalpa is kind of like the Acroma of like this generation, right? Where it's just like, it's got a ton of keywords. New players are super psyched about it. And then it also has this extra added power because it's in this Toughness Matters deck. Other decks, sure, I can see, you know, maybe it's not the best include. But this deck, I was like, it's a meme, but also it's going to kill people, which I think deserves a slot.
Totally. Yeah, and that's exactly the conversation I've seen around Zatalpa in the Abzan Toughness Matters deck is people are like, oh, no way, Zatalpa's in another precon. And then they're like, wait, if it's dealing damage equal to its toughness, then it's 16 damage each attack. And then they start like getting really excited about that. And I love that you're able to take a card that we've seen 500 times and have like a new angle to look at it with. It is perfect. You're right.
It's one of my favorite things is to get people to look at cards that maybe they've written off in a new light. And it's one of the things that we think about a lot when we're designing commander decks, when we look at archetypes. How can we get somebody to look at this archetype in a new way and be excited about it in ways that they weren't excited about the archetype previously? Like, what new twist are we adding that makes somebody go from being like, maybe that one's not for me, to being like, oh, maybe this one's for me, and maybe I am actually a Spellslinger player, or whatever your archetype is, or whatever it is that's piquing your interest. And I think Zatalpa with Toughness Matters is one of those things that gets people to think about, oh, maybe this is what I want to do, or maybe this is really cool, or maybe this card does have way more depth to it than we originally thought so.
Right. Which just kind of goes to show sometimes a card is perfect and you can just keep using it in different contexts. And I think at this point we can safely say that Zatalpa was a perfectly designed Magic card. So
I honestly, there are like so few Magic cards where I think you can say that. Like there's always like, oh, it could have been one less mana. Oh, it could have been one more damage. There's all those things that you can say, but I love everything about Zatalpa, and I will defend Zatalpa vehemently from everyone in your comment section.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, I love to go on at least one little like soapbox rant per episode, and I feel like if it's getting Zatalpa more respect, then that's perfect here for this one.
1-800 always be flapping.
Yes. Exactly. So good. Okay, I have one card I wanted to kind of shout out and ask if you had any design stories or thoughts, because I absolutely love this card, and it kind of aligns with what we were talking about earlier about finding ways to close out the game for decks. And this is Colossal Grave Reaver. So it's 6, a black and a green for a 7/6 dragon with flying. Whenever this creature enters or attacks, mill 3 cards. And whenever one or more creature cards are put into your graveyard from your library, put one of them onto the battlefield. Like, the first time I read that, I just had the biggest smile on my face, and I'm obsessed with it.
Oh, yeah. I don't. This card has not changed much since we put it into the file, which I think is a testament to how fun the card is and how well designed the original pitch for the design was. This card was designed by Victoria Sperling, the same woman I mentioned about the Zatalpa. So she was leading the Abzan deck, but everybody designs cards kind of collectively for all the decks. So we'll assign homework and just say, hey, we need a design for a cool dragon for this deck. Everybody submit designs. So she submitted this one, and I had the same reaction when I read it. I was just like, oh my goodness, this is everything I've wanted, but could not articulate or could not put into words myself. It went into the file immediately. I think it changed from mono black to green black at some point. I think it went up to 8 mana, got more stats, but like the text in the box never changed because that was what we thought was just the coolest part. The card is just super sweet, and it's on a dragon, which is just also great. Like, it's so cool in every possible way that I am over the moon about this card, and I'm so glad other people think so too, just because it's a really cool, unique ability that you don't see often.
I think we've come to my final question for you, Megan, which is, what has been one of your favorite in-game moments, or like a story that you've had while you were playtesting these decks against each other?
So there's some cards and decks that I always doubt whether or not they're They're worth the slot. You know, there's so many cards that we can choose from. When you have to narrow your deck down to the 100 cards, I know we've all had this feeling. Like, how do you make sure, how do you feel like the card you put in there was the right choice? And the card that I had doubts about was Tower Defense. And I was just like, I feel like this card is, you know, it could be anything else, any other card. I feel like, you know, people don't really like holding mana open to be reactive. Like, maybe this isn't going to go the way I think it'll go. And I saw one playtest where somebody attacked with their Butts deck and with Felithar. And the opponent blocked a couple of the guys, and they're like, okay, if I don't block these other 4, I don't die. And somebody used Tower Defense as a combat trick offensively.
Ooh.
And they gave their creatures +0/+5. If you've never read the card, it's a 1G instant. Your creatures get +0/+5 and gain reach. And that sounds like a defensive card. It sounds like you're supposed to sit back and wait for the dragons to like attack into you and then you get them, right? But in the toughness deck, if you use it offensively, it gives your creatures basically +5 damage, and the person died to tower defense as an offensive overrun, essentially. And I was just like, all right, we can't cut the card. It's got to stay in. I can't cut this card. Because that was just like the coolest thing I hadn't thought to use the card for. Because my brain was so coded to think like, oh, reach and toughness stats is a defensive thing. And someone completely proved me wrong and used it offensively. And I was like, all right, that was cool. I hope tower defense claims many more victims.
Yes, I'm sure it will, honestly. I don't know why every time I read tower defense, I think it only gives one creature +0/+5, but no,
the whole
it's
team.
all of them. Yeah.
It's crazy.
That's so good. That's so good. I think that's brilliant, and it just fits perfectly in that deck, and it feels right for the strategy. That's an incredible story, and I love that you saw something happen unexpectedly in a playtest, and you were like, okay, now I have a solid decision that no matter what, this card's staying in so that other people out there can experience this moment too.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if you're building commander decks and you're not sure which cards you want to keep in, just make sure to cast all the cards. Like, see them do a cool thing before you cut them. Don't cut a card just because you never draw it, because you'll miss out on something really, really cool like that. And maybe you'll cut a card that could have had a really awesome story attached to it. Like, I get to tell this tower defense story for the rest of my life and how cool it was. And that's just like an extra gift, right? So if you're cutting cards, wait till the card actually does something before cutting it.
Oh, that's so cool. I love that so much. Well, before we wrap things up here today, is there anything else with the Tarkir Dragonstorm commander decks that you would like to talk about or shout out or anything else like that?
Like I said earlier on in the interview, I am so thrilled at all the positivity and how much people are loving the decks. Please keep sharing all of that love and positivity. Please keep telling us how much you like cards. As designers, it is really what we do the job for, is to make everybody happy and to make people fall in love with Magic. So the more you tell us about what you love about Magic, the more we'll make cards that make other people happy or fall in love with Magic. And that's really all I want as payment for giving you cool cards, is you give me your love and affection for those cards. Tell me what you love. I want to keep making cool cards for you.
That's amazing. Just to add myself to this crowd of voices, I have never been more excited for a set of commander decks. I pre-ordered all 5 of them from my local game store, and I'm like, can't wait to go pick those up tomorrow and then just start playing them all weekend. That's my plan. I'm super excited. They feel like they're really strong decks, but they're balanced against each other. I usually don't watch like too many gameplay videos of the precons, but I've been locked in on gameplay videos for these decks. So all this is to say, I totally agree. I think everyone out there should be more vocal when they love these types of things. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Awesome. I love to hear that. Thank you so much for all the kind words.
Yes, of course. And thank you so much for coming on and letting me ask you a whole bunch of questions about all of these decks.
Thanks for inviting me. It's always a joy to talk about what we get to do, because we have to sit in several years of silence until the cards come out, where I thought I was going to lose my mind, honestly. I was so full of anticipation. Getting it all out and seeing all of this is a huge catharsis. So I'm so happy to talk about it. Thank you for inviting me. This has been a real delight.
Yay. Yes, it has been delightful for me too. Would you like to shout out any socials or anything like that, or kind of direct people somewhere?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter and Blue Sky. On Twitter, I'm BetaMTG, PhaedaMTG. And on Blue Sky, it's my first name, last name, Megan.Smith13 at Blue Sky. I post a lot about Magic design there. I also post about other games and my dogs and stuff too. So you'll get a mixed bag. Follow me there if you want to hear stuff, more design stories in the future of things I've worked on.
Yes, I love it. I'll have links to those in the show notes too. Sweet. Okay. Yeah, and thank you out there, everyone else, for listening. I'm just so hyped for this set, and I know all of you are too. Thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you on the next episode.